Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for this workshop, Future Pathways Managing Sustainability and Burnout. My name is Kathy Liao. My pronouns are she, her. I am an Asian American woman with black hair, hair tied in the back with a ponytail, and wearing a burnt orange jacket and a blurry, kind of light Zoom background. I'm the Organizational Services Program Officer here at Mid-America Arts Alliance. I'd like to personally acknowledge the ancestral lands of the Kaw and Osage nations, the Kickapoo tribe, the land of the Ochiti-Sakuing Oyate. This is the land where I'm zooming in from, present day known as Kansas City. There is so much coming at us right now, and it can feel overwhelming at times. And it is with that acknowledgement, I thank you all for setting aside the time and choosing to share space with us here today. We here at Mid-America Arts Alliance believe in strengthening and supporting artists, cultural organizations, and communities throughout the region and beyond. We are a regional arts organization representing Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas. We'll drop a link to our website in the chat. My colleagues Peter and Karis are here as well. We represent the Organizational Services Division here at Mid-America Arts Alliance. Through our programming, we offer combinations of workshops, coach consultations, and peer-to-peer learning opportunities to work with arts leaders to govern more effectively, become more fiscally astute, and develop strategies to address community needs. Today's workshop came out of a need we heard from many of the arts ecosystem conversations across the region that we've been holding. With that, I'd like to introduce our facilitator for today, Alice Berry. Seeking to create a therapeutic moment benefiting other artists as well as herself, Alice decides to concentrate her counseling practice on working with artists and creatives, individually, group, or institutionally, hoping to benefit this misunderstood and underserved population. She has a focus on stress reduction as well as various other therapeutic modalities, helping people put themselves in a state of mental and physical awareness to begin shift their lives and attitudes. Alice has a 30-year background in the arts as a fashion, textile, and installation designer, entrepreneur, and visual artist, a BA in fine art, and an MA in clinical psychology, licensed professional counselor, LPC. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Alice for her to introduce herself.
I'm really pleased to see everyone here today. I was speaking earlier that this is a talk that I do. It's pretty much how I have developed my practice working with artists and the way I help people get to begin to change whatever it is they want to do is figure out how it takes a certain effort to relax yourself and calm yourself. And everyone does that differently. So what we're going to talk about today is I will first give a little introduction of how I ended up doing this. Then I'm going to talk about the process of understanding how you want to approach stress reduction and relaxation, and everyone does it differently. And then I will get into concrete techniques and an understanding of how this works, both in a neurobiological point of view and a more mental, psychic point of view. Both ways of thinking apply. So this is called an artist's guide for mental health, but as you can see, I open it up to my definition of artist is very expansive. And so basically anyone who is thinking creatively, in my book, is an artist. Who am I? How did I get here? If you look at my background on Zoom, on my image, you can see that there's a wall with images and there are patterns hanging and so on. I was a clothing designer for many years, and I now work in my studio. It's where I see my clients. And one of the things that happens is people walk in and they say, "Oh, you get it. You actually make stuff." I've had a whole career of making clothing, making installations, making textiles. And what happened was I kind of had a moment about 15 years ago almost now of realizing that I needed to change. And I ended up going back to school for clinical psych. And during one of my internships, I had a discussion with one of my supervisors, and I was working with an artist, and I mentioned that the artist was blocked and that it was a very affecting session for me. And he said, well, so why is that? That shouldn't matter much to you. And I realized, no, no, you don't get it. When an artist is blocked, it's really important. And that can make a difference in not only how you feel, but in your economic situation. Because if you're dependent on creativity to make a living and your creativity is not flowing, there's a problem. So I began to realize that what I was bringing to the table was something that my profession even didn't really acknowledge as necessary, which is an understanding of an artistic and creative point of view. I created the practice, and one of the things I realized is that artists are not really considered as valid members of society as we might like. I mean, we're all in the world of an artist, either as a practicing independent artist or as someone who leads an organization that works with artists or creatives or whatever. We value them. I'm sure we have lots of examples of people who don't value creative practice. And so one of the things I've worked on is trying to shift that attitude in the world, but also shift it within artists themselves. Because a lot of this is internalized. A lot of this is artists thinking, oh, well, I really need to make a living, and so I should stop my creative practice because it doesn't matter anyway, and let me just go get a job, working for Google or something. And while there are very obvious moments when financial situations demand that, one of the things I encourage people to realize is that you can do more than one thing, and that it doesn't have to be an either or kind of choice, whether to live a creative life or not, and that you have some say in how your life can be arranged. And so realizing that taking care of yourself, thinking about, yes, I need my creative practice in order to keep myself in a state of joy, or in a state of flow, or in a state of being able to understand the world. It's the way I process things. However, your creative practice or the people you work with come to terms with that is very important. And it's something that shouldn't be shunted aside because you haven't been able to make a living at it. One of the things we're talking about today is burnout. The session is about how people are coming to terms with a lot of issues, either in the not-for-profit sector or in the sector that has to do with making art for a community. And burnout is a metaphor that people are talking about, and it obviously we're not literally burned out. I hope no one has burns on their skin or on from the inside or whatever. But it has to do with a sort of psychic sense of just being hollowed out, or being um, really, really done. And actually, one of the great things I would be curious about is, how would you describe your feelings of burnout? If you could come up with two or three words or a phrase that describes how you feel as would describe burnout, I would be very curious to see it. And one of the reasons I put this slide up is because it's not always how we are. It's one of the things that's important to realize is that we may feel differently because of the situation, and it's not something that is our normal state or our natural state or our comfortable state. We come to a notion of self-awareness. And what I'm talking about, how you present to yourself, how you understand your own burnout, how you understand it's affecting you and the people around you, becomes really, really important. Because if you can't see it, you can't fix it. If you can't name it, you won't know how to approach it. Self-awareness is one of the pillars of being able to shift and change your mind, your attitude, your state in life, all sorts of things. And some people are better at this than others. There's something that's not really mentioned about therapy, is that some people are better at doing certain aspects of it than others. Lots of people are really good at self-awareness, but what all that does is give them more reasons to beat themselves up. Other people are not really self-aware, but they're very resilient. Things don't bother them as much, partly because they're not aware of the depth of its effects. I gave a metaphor earlier of describing how people are feeling in these times we're in. And if you imagine living in a space where there's a lot of air pollution, certain cities in the world have very high levels of air pollution. And if for whatever reason the numbers of the pollution get really bad over time, but you still have to breathe the air. If you don't realize that the numbers are bad and the air is worse, you're still breathing in it and find yourself coughing and you're have shortness of breath and you're tired more often. Being aware is going to make that worse because you won't do anything to mitigate the effects and you won't do anything to take care of yourself. So understanding that the awareness part is really key and it relates to your ability to be creative. We're going to talk about more of how creativity is affected by all these things. But the ability to be creative is directly linked to managing stress and being self-aware of how your creativity works. So a lot of this comes from an understanding of self in terms of personality. And personality and temperament are sort of catchwords in my field right now. That's why I put both of them there. Some people describe this as temperament, and some people would say that temperament is how you're wired, personality is how that wiring is expressed. I'm agnostic about that discussion. But this ocean model is a way to understand what parts of ourselves are receptive to the creative idea and which ones aren't. There's one of the interesting things about this personality model is that artists tend to score a certain way. Openness and conscientiousness are tendencies of people who are creative in their thinking. And neuroticism tends to be people who have more difficulty thinking creatively. So, if you're interested, there's a lot of research about personality and creativity. If you can start diving into that. It's very fun. But it's a way to think about what aspects of myself I want to work with and encourage, or perhaps work with and discourage in terms of how it affects my ability to be creative. Everyone has more or less of all. If you think of these traits as sliders, no one is one way or the other. Everyone is sort of somewhere on that range from one or the other, and realizing, oh yeah, if my openness is shut down because I'm stressed, if I'm only thinking in terms of black and white and I'm catastrophizing, then that means that I'm not as creative as I could be. Or if I'm being particularly judgmental because I get judgmental of other people doing the things that I'm afraid of, either happening to me or that I might fall into, then that's keeping me from being able to see other people in a true light rather than that sort of shadow that comes from being judgmental. All of these things come into play when you're thinking about how your burnout is affecting you. When I talk about stress, stress is a really big category for me. And the very basic one is when you're out in a crowd and you feel someone's chasing you, or you're on the savannah and a lion is chasing you, or these things that, oh no, I gotta run, boom. And that's the classic fight, flight, or freeze response, the physiological response that we have. The thing is, in the world we live in, um, it's not so clear cut. There are all sorts of things that we deal with that are more subtle and are not as direct as having a clear threat. So, social media is a really excellent example of how something that is really, really stressful for people is very indirect in terms of how it affects you. You see some images on a screen and suddenly your blood pressure goes up. Or you look at your numbers on social media and you see that someone has disliked you, and all of a sudden, ah, So realizing, stress is coming from places that I don't always understand the depth of how it's stressing me out and what I should do with it. One of the things about stress, particularly the subtle kind that we're all living with, is how it affects us physiologically. As I say here on the slide, it can cause all sorts of physiological changes. It can make any illness worse, and it also affects our the way we perceive the world. I mentioned earlier that being self-awareness can have to do with noticing whether you're thinking in black and white. Attention is can be a form of stress, and how it affects your ability to either focus on something or not focus on something, depending upon how your brain works. Realizing that all sorts of emotional situations can affect stress, can that there are times when we find ourselves being drawn into situations and we think we're fine, but the temperature starts to rise, you know. So there's a concept that is kind of handy to think about this. It's called being tuned for stress. So let's imagine there's this marvelous ideal world where there's no stress. Let's say that our stress level is zero. And something happens, we get chased, or some event happens, and our stress level, we're going to have a scale of 1 to 100 here. We'll go say the stress level goes to 20. The way our bodies are designed, the way humans are designed, is that we're relaxed. We have a stressful event. All sorts of things happen in our bodies to respond really quickly to a stressful event. And then, when the event is done, we go back to being relaxed. Ideally, you should go up to 20, deal with the stressful event, and then go back to zero. That practically never happens in real life. What does happen is we start out at a baseline, and then a stressful event happens. And we go up because we respond to the stress. And instead of going back to zero, go back to 5. And so then our baseline becomes 5. And over time, each time there's a stressful event and we don't go back to baseline, our baseline stress level gets to be 30, 40, 50, even higher, depending upon your state or your situation. And you never really relax. You never really get back to baseline. And that has very, very damaging effects, physically and mentally, on your life. If you have any kind of illness, as I mentioned earlier, that heightened stress level over time makes it much, much worse. I don't think there's any illness I've ever heard of that isn't exacerbated by stress. It changes how all these things I list here on the screen, all of that happens. It changes how you engage in your relationships. It changes how you're able to view the world, and it changes how you're able to think creatively. Because if you're stressed, you're not able to see as clearly. You're not able to put together connections that you would do if you were more relaxed. So realizing and noticing in yourself, here's the self-awareness piece again. Oh, wait, am I really heightened? Even if I'm supposed to be relaxing, I can't relax. What's keeping me from relaxing? Oh, it might be because I feel disembodied. I exist in my head instead of my whole self. Well, now that's something that you'd really want to understand and realize, how can I change that? How can I become more attached to my body and experience things in a way that is not so disassociative? In an ideal world, we'd be able to understand all these things about ourselves and realize, okay, I need to engage in things that are going to create more openness. I'm going to have more flexibility of thinking. I'm going to have more flexibility of my body. I'm going to be aware of how I feel, how the world is affecting me, how people are affecting me, how I'm affecting people, so on, so on, so on. All of these things are great, but it's really, really difficult to do them if we are in a heightened, stressful state. And so we come back again to the point of being aware of your stress means that you then have an opportunity to shift it. And figuring out what that is, how you shift it is the work. That's the skill. But you can't even start to change it unless you're aware of it, right? You can't start to say, "Oh, I'm gonna do this or that, or I'm gonna feel better, or I'm gonna change this thing," unless you realize I need to change it from something else. I need to understand that I'm in a state that I want to get out of. Okay. And hopefully looking at pretty landscapes, that's one of the things that people can do. So here is the heart of the stress reduction therapeutic modality that I work with. And it's not a paint by numbers kind of thing. It is more of an understanding of how humans work, how the body works, and everyone is going to have different ways of understanding their own stress. So there's the sympathetic nervous response, which is how the body manages in a heightened state. The SNR is when you have a stimulus, stressful stimulus, and your body does all these things that we talked about earlier. And the result of those can be physical, mental, or emotional. The physical ones, holding a posture, extended crouching, sitting. Now, this doesn't seem like it would be a stressful response, but actually it's very, very common, and it corresponds to the frozen part of fight, flight, or freeze. And one of the things I noticed when we were in the pandemic was that I would talk to people and I would, just generally get to know them. And I learned that there's a question I had to ask was, when was the last time you left your room? When was the last time you got out of your chair? When was the last time you did any sort of physical movement? People were terrified, and that terror caused them to sit still. And so understanding that any kind of physical activity is going to help them. Stretching, yoga, Pilates, dance, swimming, any sort of physical flexibility could get them to help lower their stress levels. Muscles and chronic tension. I think just about everyone has some part of their body that is held in tension because of stress. And it is very, uh, it sneaks up on you. I mean, you don't realize that you're holding your shoulders up like this until 3 or 4 hours later when you start to have all sorts of difficulty moving or whatever. Just for grins, I'm going to do a little thing now that can help people. Since it's so common for people to hold tension here, I want everyone to sit up straight or wherever you happen to be sitting. I don't need to see you. I just want you to realize that you want to straighten your spine. Okay. Now, pull your shoulders up to your ears. Hold your breath and tighten your shoulders as much as you can. So you're gonna push your shoulders, push your head, your neck down towards your shoulders, and you're gonna tense this pose hold it as tightly as you can. Hold, 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 tighten, tighten, tense, hold. Okay, 1, 2, 3, relax. Take a deep breath. Again. What we just did is something called progressive muscle relaxation, which I don't know about you, but one of the reasons I love doing that is that it makes your head feel kind of floaty afterwards. Oh, someone is saying that it actually hurts. Okay, any alternatives? I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So obviously, if something hurts, don't do it. But understanding where you're holding your tension, and for whatever reason, tightening it and then releasing it is more effective at relaxing your mother's muscles than trying to just relax them without tightening them first. Um, there's something called a body scan, which I don't know how many people have heard of that, but I will put in the chat before we leave a reference. There's a guy named John Kabat-Zinn who has been instrumental in creating a lot of the mindfulness-based stress reduction ideas and techniques, and he created a modality that works with chronic pain and doing this. And he has a YouTube channel and has a body scan on it that is very effective. So if you want to try that sometime, he takes you through your entire body, tensing and releasing. And this is also a really good way to put yourself to sleep if you have trouble sleeping. So anyway, um, understanding and noticing and being aware, oh yeah, I'm feeling tight. Oh, I'm feeling, oh yeah, I can't move that. Oh yeah, that's where that comes from. A stress response. So the most basic and the most elemental and the most effective way to shift your stress state is by breathing. And if you find yourself breathing. Now, okay, just for grins, how many people here have ever had a panic attack or think that there's something that you've had where you find yourself being unable to calm yourself or unable to calm yourself down? Panic attacks are often characterized by a difficulty in focus, shortness of breath, various physical responses. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, all sorts of bodily functions go up. Taking 10 to 15 deep diaphragmatic breaths will shift your state. It will shift your state from a sympathetic state, which is what it is an extreme version of a panic attack is an extreme version of a sympathetic state, to a parasympathetic state, which is the relaxed state. So, why doesn't everybody just do this when you have a panic attack? If it's so easy to cure it with 15 deep breaths, why doesn't everybody do it? Because it's virtually impossible. It is the most difficult thing to do when you are panicked is to stop and take slow, deep breaths. And the way I describe it is if you think of a freight train, you have a freight train in this station, and it takes a while, it's got like 100 cars. It takes a while to get started. And the conductor throws on all the switches, and the train very slowly moves out of the station. And it starts. It takes a while to build up steam. It starts at 5, 10 miles an hour. If you can catch that train before it gets too far out of the station, you can throw on the brakes and it's going to go, oh, it'll stop. That train, 3 or 4 days later in the middle of the desert, going at 100 miles an hour, you can throw the brakes on. It's just going to squeal for a while. It's going to take a long time for the response to carry to the rest of the train. And this is what happens with heightened sympathetic states. If they go too far, if you're to the point where you're having a panic attack, it's just going to take you a while to slow the freight train down. It's a skill. It's something you can learn to do. The first thing to learn is to realize, oh, wait, I'm having a panic attack. What can I do? Oh, well, I'm noticing I'm having a panic attack. I can remember that there's something, oh, right, this breathing thing. Have you ever seen the movies? It's kind of a trope in the movies now. Somebody's caught in an elevator, somebody's caught in a stressful situation, and they call their therapist. And the therapist gets on the line with them and says, yeah, okay, okay, just breathe. Just find your breath. You can do it. Come on, just find your breath. And they're going, oh, I don't know. I actually saw this work once. I was with a client who was very distressed about a variety of things. And this was a person who was a yoga teacher. That's my favorite aspect of this. This is someone who absolutely knows how to do this, who understands the effects, who teaches it. But she was distressed. She was panicking. She was doing this. And I said, stop, stop, stop. 10 deep breaths. And she was furious with me. She didn't want to do it. I said, no, no, come on. And so I watched it happen. 3 or 4 breaths. She's angry. She's still around about the sixth or seventh breath, her whole body changed. She relaxed. She was able to do them more slowly. I could tell she was less angry with me because she saw, oh, right, this does work. This is how humans work. And by the 10th breath, she was like, okay, all right, we can talk now. So realizing, okay, if I can get myself to breathe, if I can do the box breathing or deep breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, all of these types of breath, it's the same thing. It's basically deep, slow breaths. Exhaling, generally, you expand your belly when you inhale and you contract your belly when you exhale. There's all sorts of training about that on the web. You can find places that will teach you how to understand your breath and how to train yourself to breathe more slowly, but you get the gist. Okay, so those are all physiological things that we can change when we're heightened. The next category is mental. Now, the first sort of field in this category is a little bit of both because it's about um, autonomic body sensations. So some piece of information causes us to feel stressed. So the classic one of this is stage fright. Someone knows they're supposed to talk or whatever, and they get nauseous or they get headaches or they have whatever effect, physiological effect they might have. One of the things that's really good about this, you can understand these things and do the things we talked about earlier, ways of shifting your response from a sympathetic to a parasympathetic one. But another one that's good to learn is biofeedback, which is a way to think about changing physiological responses. And I'm going to talk more about how these domains interact with each other. Thinking, physiological changes, emotional changes. They're each their own domain, but you can affect one with the other. So, um, biofeedback is the skill of learning how to lower your physiological readings, how to lower your heart rate, how to lower your blood pressure, how to slow your breathing. And these things can help you manage whatever sorts of autonomic stresses, body sensations you're having. So another stress response that I'm convinced that everyone in the world has, one way or another, are negative thoughts. And they're so common that people don't even realize they are a stress response because you're always thinking badly about yourself. If you're not thinking badly about yourself, you're thinking badly of someone else. And it's very comforting to think, oh man, I hate that, fill in the blank, or that person did blah, 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 or I do this all the time and I'm never going to get blah, blah, blah. And one of the ways you can tell that this is a stress response is if you can think about the moment when you were safe, happy, relaxed, comfortable. You don't have those thoughts. That's when you're feeling enough parasympathetic state to not engage in some sort of stress response. As I said earlier, some people, a lot of people, are so tuned to being stressed all the time that negative thinking is an ongoing state. It's a 24-hour state. But realizing it doesn't have to be that way and that the awareness of, oh, wait, I cannot think negatively about something and not put myself in that stressful state. That is a skill. That's something you have to learn. That's something you have to understand about yourself and how to approach it. The next category is attention. And that's another one that people don't realize is affected by stress and can cause stress responses. So if you think of attention as a spectrum, and on the one end of the spectrum is focused, and on the other end of the spectrum is open. Both of these can be good or bad, depending upon how you're wired. So if you're someone who tends to be kind of depressive and tends to be, oh, when you're feeling stressed and feeling burned out, you ruminate, you go down a rabbit hole, you think about one thing over and over again. You get this is overly focused attention. And what helps that is open attention. When you go out, you look at the world. The best thing to do is to go for a walk in nature. It is amazingly helpful. As a matter of fact, it's gotten to the point where certain doctors, MDs, are prescribing 20-minute walk in park as a way to shift that kind of ruminating mindset. But let's say you're not someone who ruminates. Let's say you're someone who tends to be all over the place. You tend to be kind of scattered. You tend to multitask without actually achieving anything. The Buddhists call this monkey mind. That kind of sensibility, that kind of person wants to focus on something. And this is where the focus on a sound or a visual or a feeling or some tactile something can be helpful in bringing that sort of scatteredness back to a focus. So again, this has to do with self-awareness. Are you the kind of person who overly focuses on things? Then open yourself up. If you're the kind of person who's a little too all over the place, then work on focusing. The big word that describes this effort is meditation. And one of the things about meditation is that there's a lot of different kinds. People have been talking a lot about mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness meditation is basically open meditation. You are opening yourself up to everything that happens in the world without judging any of it. So you enjoy the information, particularly if you're in a pleasant place, you can open yourself to that. On the other hand, there's a really strong tradition of meditation that has to do with focus. You focus on a sound. You know, you've all been to yoga class where they ring a bell, right? You're supposed to focus on the bell. You can focus on a flame. You can focus on your breathing. The most basic type of meditation is focusing on your breathing, right? So realizing that either one of these extremes has a type of meditation that you can learn to counteract it. And knowing yourself, knowing what kind of meditation works for you is going to help you. A lot of people say, "Oh, I can never meditate. Oh, I just get impatient or whatever." And it's probably because they were trying the wrong kind. So if you were someone who was trying TM, and it didn't work, well, yeah, because probably you needed to do mindfulness instead, or you needed to do a moving meditation. There's something called labyrinth walking. It's a type of meditation where you walk in a pattern again and again and again. One of the things about that is that it's moving the body. A lot of people meditate while they're moving. And a lot of people don't realize that's what they're doing. But people who say, "Oh, I gotta go for a run," or "Oh, I just love boating. I get in my canoe and I can paddle, or I kayak and paddle," and so on. If you get to the point where you just really love doing some sort of repetitive motion over and over again and it calms you, that is a type of meditation. It just doesn't have the sort of spiritual woo-woo that connects the other things. But they are all equally effective if you know yourself, if you know, okay, this is what helps me. I need to go for a run. This is what helps me. I need to go sit in the park and stare at the trees. Whatever works for you, the self-awareness part can help you figure out how to bring yourself back to a state of relaxation, of openness, of awareness, of a parasympathetic state. So I went to school and I studied all of this and I got certified in stress reduction and so on and so on. And for years, I basically just taught the physical and the mental. And I began to notice that there was something missing. I noticed that people would come to me and say, yeah, yeah, I did the things you told me. And yeah, I worked on my mental and I was working on my negative thinking and so on and so on, but I still feel blah, blah, blah. And over the past 10 or 15 years, there has been a lot of new understanding of a part of the body called the vagus nerve. And what we've understood is that it is a conduit to the brain and the body, and it can process emotion. And I may be explaining this in a way that's not particularly true to the neuroscience aspect of it, but essentially what happens, if you think of the brain, you can, I don't know if you can see my fist here. If you think of the brain, the base of it is the limbic system. This is the system that has to do with responses, drives, eating, sleeping, screwing, that kind of thing. Where my thumb is in my fist, in the middle of the brain, is where the hippocampus and the amygdala are. And those two parts of the brain work together and are where emotions are processed, let's say. The front of the brain, like behind the forehead, is the prefrontal cortex, and that's the executive. That's the decision-making part. That's the part that hopefully is rational. If you think of three people in a car, the executive is the driver. They're going along. They've got the plan. They're the ones with the GPS going. This is where we're going. This is what we're going to do. Riding shotgun is emotions. Emotions are like, oh, yeah, it feels so great. I remember when we did that, or oh, it would be so fun to do this, or blah, blah, blah. In the back seat is the limbic system. Oh, let's go buy donuts. Oh, let's go to that club over there. Let's go party. Oh, let's go do this. Okay. Ideally, all three of these things are working together. They're all like having a great time. And oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Emotions, let's go do that. Or oh, I remember when that's that. Or oh, yeah, we are hungry. Let's make a pit stop. Okay. When things are not in sync, when you're tired, when you're overworked, when you are burned out, all of a sudden, the driver gets derailed. The driver gets attacked. And emotion takes over, the back seat takes over, and all of a sudden you can find yourself in a car in a ditch. And realizing, okay, wait a minute. Why, what happened here? How did this work? Why am I feeling so derailed? Or why can't I focus? Or why can't I do the thing I want to do? And it's because your emotional state is being, it's more difficult to balance all these things when you are tired, overworked, and stressed. And this is another sort of self-awareness thing of realizing, okay, I can't focus, I can't be rational if I'm stressed. So understanding that there's a way to control your emotions is often quite radical for people, particularly people who feel driven by their emotions and feel like they don't control them. But here we are at the self-awareness piece again, knowing, oh, wait, no, that's my emotional state. Let me take a few deep breaths. Yeah, okay, that's what I'm feeling. Yeah, all right. I can shift my emotional state. This is something I'm learning how to do. So, in order to think about this, for the sake of argument, let's say that there's three categories of emotional feelings, emotional states. The baseline, the one we like, the one everybody would like to live in, is safe, happy, comfortable, right? And we're going to call that the vagal state. So if you have a place to make a note or something, or if you want to, or just remember, think of an image or an idea or a memory that makes you feel safe, happy, and comfortable. So take a minute, solidify that image in your head. Very common ones are childhood memories if you had a peaceful childhood. Other ones are beaches or places in nature. A lot of people remember a group of people that they were with that they felt safe, happy, and comfortable with. Those are common ones. Everyone has different ones. But whatever one works for you, hold that as a note. So the next category we're going to call sympathetic, and that's the one that's action and moving and anxious and red and a variety of ways of describing something that's really heightened. The most common one I get for this is traffic, being stuck in traffic. But any number of things can be something that you identify in your brain. The symbol you have in your brain for the sympathetic state is that. Okay. So you got that in your head. Okay. The third domain is dorsal. And so we're going to call that the still, depressed, dark, in a cave, buried, uh, slow, uh, curled up, repressed, all these things. Some sort of image like that. So, okay, you get to a point where you realize, yeah, okay, my emotions are really causing me grief here. And the way I would describe to people the difference between trying to think your way out of an emotion is kind of like trying to bring a knife to a gunfight. Emotions will win. A lot of times you don't even realize it's an emotion. One of my favorites are people who are very interested in rational thinking and being straightforward and not being emotional. They actually are being very emotional. They just don't acknowledge what they're feeling are emotions. The desire for power, the desire for control, the desire to keep a lid on things. Those are all emotions. But they think that's rational. And so they continue to put those forth as better than other kinds of emotions that they look down on, which is also another emotion, power. But realizing, okay, I'm feeling this emotion, it's getting in my way, I don't want to do this, I can shift what I'm feeling. And you do that by going into the memory of your vagal state. Whatever your happy, safe, comfortable moment was, if you stop and really remember that image, whatever you came up with, put yourself back in it. Notice how things smell. Notice the textures of what's around you. If you're with people, notice how they respond to things, how they're moving. Notice whether it's warm or cold. Notice whether the sun is shining on you, how it feels to have if you can come up with as many types of detail as you can about that memory that is safe, happy, and secure, you can shift your emotional state. One of the ways I try to help people think about this is if you ever are doing work on a computer and you're doing some sort of illustration and you want to shift the color. So you know how they have the color bar and then there's a big screen that's one color. And in order to shift the color to watch it, you can actually bleed a color into the screen. You think your emotion's the same way. You have this one emotion. You can bleed another emotion into it to shift the color of your emotions. That's what this is. And again, this is a skill. This is something you can learn to do. This is something you can get better at. Once you understand yourself enough, once you understand this is possible, and once you understand, oh, it works. So you've noticed me talk about awareness a lot. These are 4 stages, you might say, to help you come to terms with learning these skills. These to go through all of these steps is going to help you with each of the types of things I've been mentioning as physical, mental, or emotional ways of managing stress. So the first is to notice, is awareness. The second is to understand it, to like name it and say, oh, that's this. And oh, I understand why this is coming because that's there. No, no, no. And for a lot of people, therapy is helpful in that. It's like you figure out, oh, I understand why that's bothering me or why that pushes my buttons or whatever. The third one, non-judgmentalism, self-compassion. I'm not going to beat myself up about this. I'm not going to let my negative thoughts cause me to change my effort. I'm not going to say, oh, I can't do this anyway, so never mind. I'm going to say, oh, right, this is me doing that thing. I understand why I'm doing that thing. I'm not going to beat myself up about it. I'm going to focus on what it is I want to do. So the fourth one, relinquishment, letting go, is either letting go of the idea that's upset you or understanding what you can change to let go of the state. There's a lot of different ways to interpret that last line. But hopefully, you can get to the point where you realize, oh, yeah, okay, so I'm feeling this way, and it's making me do this thing. And I understand why I'm doing this thing. I'm not going to beat myself up about it. I'm going to look at it and say, is there something constructive I can bring to that to change it? If not, then I can realize, oh, this is me having a stress response. I can do the thing I know that helps me manage that kind of stress response. As I've been saying, this is a skill. And if you'll notice, I have been using different kinds of examples, different language examples to demonstrate all these things. One of the ways I like to help people think about learning these techniques is to compare it to weightlifting. And I don't know how many people out there have ever lifted in either on machines or free weights or whatever, or even if there's some skill that you ever learned, some physical skill that you had to get better at, and that you started out being really bad or really weak at. So if you do free weights and you decide, okay, I'm going to do some reps, I'm going to lift, I'm going to strengthen my arms, I'm going to lift weights. The first time you do it, the first time you lift a weight, you go, oh, this hurts. Ouch. Ooh. And so you try to do it and you try to do 5 reps. And let's say you're just doing 5 pounds in each arm and it's like, oh, that hurts. Oh, I don't like it. But for whatever reason, you keep doing it. Every other day, you start doing 20 reps with your arms. By the time you have been doing that every other day for 3 weeks or 3 months, you got it. It doesn't even hurt. You don't feel it anymore. You start adding weight. You start saying, oh, yeah, I got this. I can do this. Your brain can learn in the same way. It feels uncomfortable when you start doing these things I'm talking about. It feels like, oh, this never works. Oh, I can't do this. I was giving this talk to a group of students once, and one of the students said to me, what if it feels stupid? What if I just say, oh, this is stupid. This won't work. I'm like, do it anyway. Even if it's stupid. What's it going to hurt if it's stupid? You try it. You keep trying it. And you see what change happens. So these are the 4 sayings that I have at the bottom of your handout. And I find that they're really, really helpful to kind of keep in mind, not just in terms of stress reduction, but just in terms of how things come to us and how we deal with problems in life. The first one is awareness. I've been talking about awareness this whole time. Understanding something, knowing what you're dealing with is key. The second is remember what you know. And this seems kind of silly, but quite often you know more than you realize, and that you can bring your skills from one aspect to another. Short, quick story. When I was studying, I was going back to school. I hadn't been to school in 20, 40 years almost. And so I had to take a test. And they in my program, they front loaded the most difficult courses to weed out people so they knew who they'd get, right? And so I'm in this really difficult psych course, and I have my first midterm, and I had a panic attack. And I'm like, okay, I got to be able to deal with this. What is this? And so there, I go to the counseling department, and they have a thing where people are having test anxiety. It's like, oh, there's a term, great. And so I go, and this guy is describing all these things that I've been talking about, and I'm like, wait a minute, I know what this is. I've been studying yoga for years. This is all the things they teach you to do in yoga. I already knew that. I just didn't know that I could bring the skills I had learned in yoga to being calm and taking a test. And so from that point on, whenever I had a big exam or a big presentation, I would do 20 minutes of yoga in the room next door, and I was golden. But I didn't know that because I didn't realize that I needed to remember what I know. A lot of times you've had training. A lot of times when I'm talking to people, I say, have you ever learned an instrument? Have you ever been an athlete? Have you ever done something that you got really good at? In doing so, you had to learn all these things, but you don't apply it to the rest of your life because that was when you were a kid, or that was, I'm not a musician anymore, or whatever. You've learned skills that you had before that you need to remember that you know them. So, two things can be true at the same time. One is, oh, yeah, this is all great. It's going to be hard. The other is, oh man, I really need to do this, and it's going to be hard, and I'm going to learn to do it. Both of those things are true. The one that I always use this one for is when people realize that they're in a relationship and they can't stay with the person, but they still love them. And so you are still in love with this person. You cannot live with this person. Both things are true. There's a lot of things in life where two contradictory things seem to be that you can't, but they're true at the same time. And that something you learn to live with. It's okay. The last one is also kind of controversial, is nothing matters. Because in the end, nothing does. We are all dust, right? Depending upon your point of view, depending upon your worldview, some people have more or less capability of dealing with this one. But I find that it kind of helps put things in perspective. You know, obviously, we care if we live or die. We care if the people around us live or die. But in the end, a lot of people find this helpful in realizing it doesn't matter if there's someone that doesn't like what they're doing, or there's someone who's telling them they can't, or there's someone who's trying to cross them in life, or they're trying to change things. It's like, okay, it doesn't matter. I had a client who had an epiphany once when she realized that it didn't matter whether she was good at something or not. If she enjoyed it, it was worth doing. And it had never occurred to her that that was a valid thing. You could only do something either if you were really good at it or if you made money, and preferably both. But doing something because you like it, because it gives you joy, it's okay. It doesn't matter if it doesn't pay you. It doesn't matter if nobody else thinks it's okay. You do it because you need to do it. All of the things I've been talking about in ways of using language to talk about things that are not based on language, like emotions, like physiological stuff. These are all metaphors. And I want to emphasize that everyone comes up with their own metaphors. When I was asking people to describe how they feel about burnout, this is what I meant. I wanted you to come up with a way to think about this for yourself so that you can then deal with it based on that understanding. Metaphor helps us understand stuff that we can't just use anger or sadness or, the three basic emotions. There's lots of different ways to express emotions in words, and there's even more ways of expressing emotions and ideas and feelings and issues using metaphor. And so we're creative people. We like to think, we use language, we use visuals, we use all sorts of things. There's visual metaphors, there's language metaphors, there's physical metaphors. Realizing that that can help us come to terms with all these things that we want to deal with ourselves and help bring ourselves back to the state we want to be in. Understanding that burnout can feel like depression, depending upon your point of view, depending upon how you're wired, is very common. And this is where the self-awareness comes in. If you can catch yourself as to whether you're able to recuperate, if you are able to go have a few days off and feel better or not, if you are able to realize, oh, it's this job that's causing me to feel this way. When I don't do this job, I feel different. A lot of times in when we're diagnosing depression with people, we talk about clinical depression versus situational depression. And they're both valid, but one is responsive to changes in life, changes in situation, and the other one often isn't. And that's kind of how you can tell the difference. And frankly, if you're in a situation that you can't get out of, the one is going to feel very much like the other because there's no way to change it. If you are in a dead-end job and you are really without agency and you're financially up against it and you have no way out of it, I mean, sometimes people are just stuck in those kind of situations. Feeling depressed is logical. Feeling depressed in that situation makes sense. And if they really can't find a way out of it, then it's going to feel as if it's clinical. But if all of a sudden you had enough money and there was a job that you enjoyed, man, it's amazing how much better I feel. So I realize that these two things are linked, but that's kind of how you can judge whether it's really depression or it's situational. Yes.
Alice, there's a question in the chat from Archer. They said, I'm curious if you have strategies for applying these skills in a work environment that has a
Uh-huh.
culture of urgency and maybe
Uh-huh.
resistant to implementing these ideas because of production or
Because of
timeline.
production or deadlines. Right. Okay. So that's one of those situations that I was talking about that you don't have much control over, right? And so understanding, first of all, this is not me, this is the situation. So many people internalize deadlines, they internalize production limitations or whatever, as if it's them. But if you realize, oh, this is a thing that I have to deal with, I can walk away from it when I go home. I can realize, oh, this is a thing. Once it's done, it'll be done. It's not really linked to who I am or how I feel or what good I am. So that's one way to kind of help you mitigate those feelings. Another one is to realize when you're stressed, one of the things that happens is you tend to think in terms of black and white. It's like either I do this or everything goes to hell. Either this is the way it is or it's not at all. 9 times out of 10, there's a third way. You can engage other people, you can renegotiate the deadline, you can realize there's a different way to do something. But remembering that your thinking may be limited because you're up against it. If you take a breath and think, okay, what other way is there to solve this? How else can I? This is where the creative thinking comes in. What else can I do to help myself not be overwhelmed by this situation, as well as doing a good job with the deadline or the production mode? Mhm.
There's another question from Liz. They asked, do you have tips for applying these principles to workplace and preventing burnout to support those on our team? Similar to what Archer asked, taking it beyond the individual and using it to support others.
Sure. One of the things that happens also when the person in charge is burned out is that they have trouble listening. And so you combine not being able to listen with thinking in black and white, and quite often what also goes along with that is being judgmental. It exacerbates the situation. So realizing what's going to help others is being able to listen to them. Quite often, if people feel they're heard, even if they can't change what it is they're upset about, they understand that someone knows where they're at and understands their feelings. The second thing is helping them learn these skills as well. hopefully this is like a tree branching. So I've presented these things to you. You can take these things. You have the card deck. It's all on my website. You can go here and teach other people this too and help people think, okay, just 10 deep breaths. Or can you describe how that feels? Or what works for you? A lot of times people will come in. This happens in corporate trainings all the time. I get people telling me stories about how, oh, yeah, they did this corporate training where all of us were supposed to walk around and pretend we were bunnies or whatever. And for like two or three people in the group, that might work. But for the other 20 people, it's like, this is ridiculous, right? Understanding how each of the people involved in your situation or who you're working with, how do they manage stress? What are their issues? Some people are going to be emotional. Some people are going to be hyper detached. Some people are going to be physically ill. Some people are going to be unable to sit still. Everyone is going to have their different way of understanding stress. And then if you can help them understand what works for them, everyone benefits.
There's one more. I think it may be a similar question that Nicole asked. Um, she asked, I'm wondering what are some ways individuals and arts organization can begin to build a culture of
Culture of
recovery from,
recovery.
from burnout
Right.
and not just
Okay.
prevention or management?
Okay. Okay. So a lot of stress comes from the way things are set up in structures, in work environments and work cultures and so on. Um, One of the things over the past decade or so, I've been working with people who are in charge of not-for-profit arts organizations. It's been really fascinating. And the thing they come up against is the way things were and the way the person who founded it, if they're no longer there, insisted things get done, or the way the person who founded it, who's still there, won't change. And so a lot of this has to do with being able to figure out how to institute changes in the culture that acknowledge difference in how people manage stress and acknowledge that stress is a thing that affects people's work and ways to mitigate it. So, a classic one is demanding that everyone be on time at the same time in the same place. It used to be that's how our culture was. We now realize that's not necessary. Is your work culture flexible enough to acknowledge that there are some people who work later, work better in the afternoon and evening? Some people work better earlier. Is there a time when everybody in the office at the same time and then some people leave early, some people leave later, blah, blah, blah? That's just one example of understanding how an institutional culture can be something that hopefully people don't get stressed in the first place, but then recovery can be built into the model of the work culture. But again, listening and understand what people need and acknowledging the validity of that. All the things I just said are problematic in places, but realize, okay, this is how we can start to shift attitudes and shift situations.
A question in the chat asked, do you think it's helpful to bring those conversations into the workplace if we are in leadership positions to encourage staff to think about how they manage their stress? How would you
Okay,
start the conversation?
okay. There's a lot of different ways, it would depend on the situation. One example would be there's already an issue. There's bad behavior going on. There's people who are unwilling to do work they've been assigned. There's just bad blood. Sitting down and acknowledging without blame. See, this is the part that's hard, is sitting down and saying, yeah, all right, I know people are upset. It's not anyone's particular fault that we're going to talk about now. What we're going to talk about is figuring out how do we get to a point where we can all do the work we want to do. There are a lot of situations where there are generational differences in expectations. And I'm the first to acknowledge these seem like really difficult arguments to have. Um, Certain people have expectations of the workplace, and other people feel those expectations are unreasonable. Who's right, who's wrong? I'm not going to get into that right now. But what I do want to hope people can acknowledge is that both sides might have a validity of opinion and acknowledge both sides are valid. How do we come to terms? How do we acknowledge, okay, we need to get the work done. What's the best way to get the work done? And it might be a question of understanding, wait, what is the work that needs to be done? What actually is part of the work and what is actually part of the culture of expectation? Parsing all of these things out. This is where you come into communication and really beginning to understand what people are saying, what they understand, what they don't. Everyone is going to be a different person at work than they are outside of work. Remember that slide I had earlier on that says, "Who are you? Who do people think you are?" Understanding that that's okay, and that the person you are at work with the group of people you work with has to come to terms with the personalities and situations of the people you work with. It doesn't mean that it has to be how you change your life. It is that you come to terms with an understanding of the situation you're in. This is what I was talking about by flexibility of thinking, and realize, okay, for this moment, I need to do this. For this situation, I need to do this. For this person, I am willing to work in this way because it's going to give me, it's a means to an end. And it's not that I have to change who I am. I am not being challenged here by someone saying, you have to be different. No, I have to work within the confines and the situation that I'm in to get a result. That's not a bad thing. People often think if I have to change anything about myself, if I have to make a compromise or something, then that's bad. No, you work with what you have in order to come to terms with people. Hopefully, that's how work environments are. We all know that that's not always the case, but ideally, that's what you have happen.
Alice, can I make a comment about that?
Please.
I think that's something I've been thinking a lot about that because I do hear, I think we talk about, I was leaning, I have a interest in acceptance commitment therapy. And I think the acceptance piece is what you were sharing. Of accepting doesn't mean that you are agreeing to, or like,
Right. It's not
like you're,
okay. It's just that I acknowledge and realize this is the case.
yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the acceptance part is sometimes the hard part of like, first of all, I do have to
Mhm.
accept this is my situation. This, whether good or bad or whatever is happening, and maybe even taking out the judgment of this is just what is going on. I think
Mhm.
that can be um, applicable to our current situation as well. It's like, this is what is going on. I think that is a important, I think that's such a powerful place to start of that acceptance. And then from there, I think then we can move towards action that's
Mhm.
with an acceptance of the situation. And oftentimes it's that lack of acceptance, like, no, this can't be this way. Like, this is not right. Like, we can't, this is not going to do. And then oftentimes that led to some or
Yeah.
inaction or kind of that lack of clarity. So
Yeah.
that's something that has been on my mind because I think I personally have confused acceptance with giving in, right? So I
Right.
think, or
It's not the same
resignation,
as
or
forgiveness.
it's not
No,
the same. Yeah,
it's not.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that because you and I were talking about how a lot of people, we think one of the reasons this workshop was so popular is because people are looking at the world situation right now and feeling a lot of stress and coming to terms with realizing, okay, the world is not the way I think it should be. I have to accept that. Things may be challenging for me that I don't like, that I disagree with, that may be people I thought I could trust, I can't. I have to come to terms with that and then decide, okay, how do I want to go forward knowing this is how things are? Not, oh, this should change, and so then we can do that. No, that's not going to change. Or at least it's not going to be something you can count on. We don't know. Uncertainty is also something you have to learn to accept and say, all right, I don't know what's going to happen. How can I prepare? What I saw you taking a breath there, just at the thought of that. See, that's how that works. You go to yourself and you say, "Oh, I don't know. Okay, what can I do?" Hmm? Realizing that that's a way to handle it. And again, it's not that you have to change; it's that you have to be flexible in your thinking of how to handle the situation. A lot of self-awareness comes from and develops confidence. And so having confidence in your knowledge of yourself is going to help you be able to handle a lot of different things. And feeling like, okay, I understand this is how I react to things. I understand this is what it causes me to do. I understand I can change that. I know myself well enough to know this is how I can change it. Making that change is going to give you the confidence to then do other things as well. This will all snowball, ideally. It can affect various other areas in your life.
We are at about time.
Yeah, we are. 2 minutes.
Yes. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much, Alice, for this presentation. It is packed with knowledge. I think I personally will have to sit with it. And there are so many practical skills. I also really appreciate the questions and the discussion after this
Sure,
as
my
well.
pleasure.
So
My pleasure.
thank you so much,
Um,
Alice.
yeah, just
Um,
so if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to email me or I guess or contact me through the organization. I'm happy to talk to people and I do individual therapy as well. So you can give me a call.
Thank you, Alice. And as we wrap up, I do want to share really quickly that we do have two more workshops coming up. This is the first of this calendar year that we're doing with Alice on managing sustainability and burnout. The other two workshops that we'll be doing is media training and crisis communication in September, and another fundraising workshop in December as well. So if any of these topics are of interest, please do sign up. And again, thank you, everyone. I'm glad we're right at time. And thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for sharing the space. And yeah, and I told Alice at the beginning, her presence is so grounding. And I'm just really grateful to be in the space with her and with you all as well.
I'm very happy to have been able to talk to you all today. I hope you have a great day.